Geoffrey Shepherd es economista y doctor en economía de la Universidad de Essex, Inglaterra. Con interés particular en el estudio de las instituciones, ha trabajado durante más de 30 años para el Banco Mundial en temas de desarrollo del sector privado en diferentes países a nivel mundial. Posteriormente se desempeñó como especialista líder en temas de reforma al sector público y fortalecimiento institucional en América Latina y el Caribe.
Why evaluation results are not used more, even though there are a very large number of people and institutions who know how to do it very well, and produce a lot of evaluation. A lot of that gets used, but a lot of it doesn't get used. So the question is why isn't it getting used? And my suggestion was as follows. In some cases, monitoring and evaluation are carried on through very highly specified systems. You used to find that the case in Australia, you now find it the case in Chile, you find it to some extent the case in Canada. Now, those systems, the results that come out of those systems, it appears, very rarely get used to change policies or to make fundamental corrections to existing policies. They get used to improve the implementation of existing policies. That is not a bad outcome in itself, and that's a very worthy thing for evaluation to do, but the mystery remains about why evaluation doesn't have more of an impact on public policies. I then spoke about evaluation as a procedure or as a culture. The practice of evaluation, the practice of wanting to analyze whether programs that have been carried out or are to be carried out, whether they're going to be effective and efficient. And it's a mindset, it's a culture. We go around the world and we see in some ministries and some government agencies that culture either exists or it doesn't. And I have a substantial level of surprise in some ways that the results of ad hoc evaluations still don't affect government more, government policy more than they do. And what I suggested in the presentation was that, well, we know that at the core of policy-making process is a very political process. People make political decisions. They are not equipped necessarily to absorb technical advice, and they may not want to. So what I'm suggesting is that evaluators have to learn to become a little bit political and learn how they can insert their technical findings into political circuits of discussion. That essentially was my point. What I was trying to do, and what I hope would be most useful, was to paint a broad picture of how policies get made in more advanced, in richer countries. And when you paint that picture, you realize that it's complex, that you have many processes going on, you have many institutions involved, both at the center of a government and at the periphery of a government. So I was trying to paint a picture of what was a complex process in order to help participants who I understand to belong to the world of evaluation, to present them with some sense of the kind of structures they have to deal in if evaluation is to have its results used more effectively. I also suggested that there were manifest weaknesses in some ways in institutional structures in Latin America that made it more difficult for expert policy advice, including evaluation results, to be taken up than it would be in the countries of the OECD. And what I suggested in particular was that the center of the government in Latin American countries, by which I mean that the office of the president, while it had abundant political expertise, lacked the technical expertise to receive, digest, and comment on and coordinate more technical policy proposals. Well, first I have to emphasize that every single country we looked at both presidential countries, and that was just the United States, and parliamentary countries, every single country had a strong secretariat at the centre of government that supported the work, both political and technical, of the Prime Minister, the Cabinet or the President. So that is important, very important, and the most important thing in itself. But in addition, you find some very interesting examples worth further study for Latin America, notably the Executive Office of the President, which is the White House in the United States, has developed a very powerful capacity to be involved in the policy process. But we also find in France and United Kingdom, within the central government secretariat that I've been speaking of, you also find very interesting research institutes which take a somewhat more theoretical but more in-depth look at whatever are the main policy issues that the leader of the government, the cabinet or the prime minister want them to look at. Other examples, the Scandinavians, although they weren't formally covered in our study, but the Scandinavians are very good at convoking panels that combine technical expertise with political representativeness, and at the request of the government, these panels will study a particular policy issue and come out with recommendations about what the policy might be. And those panels have a very strong influence on policy making. I think in the short term, if countries are to improve the way they make policies, they have to think very hard about how they can strengthen the president's office. Now, there's a political question there, and that is that the more that presidents are obliged to represent the popular mandate, the more we will get policies that make sense for most people. There's a political development that's going on in Latin America towards deeper forms of democracy. We see it most advanced in countries like, I think, Chile, Brazil and Costa Rica, but it's going on everywhere really, one way or another. That political process, I believe, will of itself demand better policy making. But for the short term, I think those presidential offices, it will be useful to improve them. For the longer term, I think governments should be trying to encourage more policy work outside the government. They should do what they can to encourage different institutions and organisations that are not governmental to look at policy issues and provide their own views. Again, I think the political process will help that. And in the longest term, I think we also have to, well, perhaps still also the medium term, we have to strengthen the ministries, which can often be very weak in policy making, and we must strengthen the Congress, which is often very weak in policy making. We're working in an area here that neither the World Bank nor the development community has in the past much understood as a very important area for asking questions. Although I must say the Inter-American Development Bank has done some very good work paving the way on this. So I would very much hope that this line of inquiry, whether I'm speaking about the work the World Bank does or the work or the way evaluators see the world, this line of inquiries of how policy-making systems work, which is both a technical and a highly political question, this line of inquiry should be continued.